Hello everyone, Josh from C2000 here, and today I've got another video for you all. We're going to be talking about Twice Dead King, both Ruin and Reign, as part of Audio Anarchy. So, I know it's been a while since I covered one of these audiobooks, but I figured we ought to pick one up. I originally planned to cover Dracula over Halloween, but didn't happen. Maybe next year. But we're here talking about the Twice Dead King, and this is one of 3 Necron books that we have, because up until about 9th edition, our lore was fairly different, and like if you go quite early back to like 3rd edition, we were essentially the same as Tyranids, where we had no lore ourselves. It was just other forces reacting to us in terms of the Necrons, and I say that as someone who primarily plays Necrons. So What? I like Terminator, don't judge. But, and no, that was not a Judgment Day joke. But, anyway, the 3 books, you have the 2 Twice Dead King books that I basically, in my head, it's 2 books, and Twice Dead King and, like, Reign and Ruin are basically the same book. Because, I'm going to be honest with you, if you were to, like, play the audiobooks for these back-to-back without pause, I genuinely would forget it was 2 books, because it's essentially just, there's no like real time jump or anything, there's no like massive skip. It's like you pick up immediately like seconds after the one ends, and it feels like it feels like one big book cut in half for readability and saleability. So we have these essentially 2 very different types of things. You have Infinite and the Divine, which I adore. Trazen is one of my favourite characters. And like, I think anyone who likes 40K likes Trazen, because he's just the British Museum given a face and a pair of legs and just told to go ham. So, you know, it's funny. Like, you know, it works as a satire. It also works as a satire of like war gamers and the people who actually play the game. So, you know, I think that's why we kind of appreciate it, because Trazen and his kleptomania is essentially a critique of the player base. The whole, like, oh yes, I'm aware I have, like, 3 of these intercessors, but if I want to make that list, I need another one. And Trazen's just like, oh, if I want to make that display in the gallery, I'm going to need that other Space Marine helmet. So, yeah, but that tonally is completely different to the Twice Dead King. Thing is, I like both, but Twice Dead King, you aren't the higher up Necron nobility in this. You're not the Treyarchs. You're not the top of the dynasty. You are not the top of the food chain. You're not going to be pulling out the tricks that Trazen and Ulrican pull. You know, there's moments in this book where it's like, we don't have connection for reanimation. There is something jamming reanimation. Every Necron we lose here is a loss to the dynasty and the Necron race as a whole. Because one thing Infinite and the Divine didn't really touch on is the fact that the Necrons are essentially a dead race like the Eldar. They're just a dead race in a different fashion. And you've also got the fact that they have different effects and afflictions because of the transformation into the Necrons. There's a thing in Twice Dead King that I really like, which is the Dysphorak, which is in like the lords that kept their personalities. They will have moments where it's like something will remind them of their human bodies, and then they will go, wait, I don't have eyes. Wait, I don't have muscles. Wait, I'm not breathing. Wait, I'm dead. Like, because the cybernetic consciousness in their head or in their faceplate is actively trying to catch up with the fact that they are entombed inside a metal machine. They are not a living thing. They are a machine with programming that has a human mind implanted over it. Which, if you watch Doctor Who, you'll realise there's a very similar thing with the Cybermen, and when they have their emotions switch back on and thus their personalities, they suddenly go through the same thing and it causes their head to explode. And you also have other things, like, in terms of the model line for Necrons, one of my favourite things that I want to expand into is the Destroyer cults, which we actually have some decent lore for them in Twice Dead King, because you see them briefly in Infinite and the Divine, and you kind of get a good example of how dangerous they are in Infinite and the Divine. But Twice Dead King, you actually get kind of an explanation as to why they are and how they got the way they did. They were like normal Necrons, but over time their programming is just degraded and they've just gone mad. And the one thing I really love about the Twice Dead King is the fact that its mission statement is basically absolute power corrupts absolutely, because basically when the main character is called I can't remember what he's called, actually. I just dropped out of my head. I literally said it in the previous attempt at recording this. Altex. Yes, Altex. He was originally like, oh, we're a dead race. I can't afford to lose warriors. I can't afford to lose this, that, and the other, because every Necron we lose is a blow to the species. We're gonna die out if I can't get my head around this. And he's looking at like the Necron strategy and the strategies they've employed for years, because before they were Necrons, they were Necrontyr. And the Necrontyr gave even less of a frack about whether you came back alive or not. The nobility always saw there's flashbacks in the original where we see him as a human and kind of Necron society as a human, which is nice. It's a made-up dynasty for the book. It's not one in the codex, but it is nice to see kind of like what that society looked like when they were human, because, again, the only other book we have for Necrons, Infinite and the Divine, doesn't really go into pre-biotransference, which is when they became the Necrons. And it kind of like, there's all these things that it covers in terms about like, the impact of them becoming Necrons, what it had on them, and the various afflictions. We get some really good lore for the Flare virus in Twice Dead King. The lore for the Flare virus, like in Infinite and the Divine, Trazyn is horrified at the idea of, oh my god, I've been near a flayed one. Oh, yuck, disgusting. And it kind of comes across as like just eccentricness, just Trazyn completely overreacting, and the fact that it's like, oh yeah, you may become infected, but Trazyn's like, oh no. Like, whereas in this, you kind of understand why they are so terrified of that subsection of their own species. The flayed ones are just members of Necron society that have essentially regressed and tried to take on more animalistic behaviors. They try and cannibalize enemy corpses, because they're thinking like, eat, because they're essentially trying to take on certain Necron. They're trying to take on certain old Necrontyr functions, like the idea of you kill something that's edible, you eat it. The whole that kind of thing. And the Necron nobility see it as utterly disgusting, to the point where anyone shown exhibiting these symptoms will have them executed. Which I find it quite interesting as to why are they. The law they've been given, it's quite interesting, and I like kind of like the idea that the certain things go wrong with the Necrons because of just how ancient the technology is, and very much like the Imperium and Chaos, they don't understand how their own technology is created, because guess what? The Necrons didn't create their technology, they were created by the Catan. And considering the fact they caged up the Catan, they're hardly going to be very forthcoming about how certain things work. I must admit that the Twice Dead King, if you play Necrons and you enjoy your Necron boys, I definitely think it's well worth reading, just for the lore you get on your faction. This is kind of like if you're a Space Marine player and you want to read the Heresy to understand what happened with the Legions and everything, right? it also goes into detail about stuff that happened in the War in Heaven, because the flare virus dates back to a certain event in the War in Heaven, and there's several other stuff, like, you know, the fact that regicide is seen as like the most unspeakable crime in Necron tier society. You know, it's like that's the big taboo. It's like, hey. And the fact that, like, you know, in a society that is functionally immortal, how does the line of succession work? You know, what happens if the king falls to the flare virus? Is it still regicide? You know, that kind of stuff. And it's just, the Necrons make a very interesting protagonist because, as daft as it sounds, compared to the humans in 40k, they actually come across as more human. And they are, because the Space Marines, they've basically been lobotomized of all fear and certain emotions, so they're very, like, they don't recoil in horror at something, or they don't, like, you know, they don't get shell shock or things like that, you know, stuff like the Imperial Guard might do. Whereas the Necrons, you know, there's certain things genuinely disgust them, certain things frighten them, you know, like, and it's kind of funny to think this big metal Terminator lord that's pretty damn good with, like, glaives and high-tech technology and can literally summon lightning is terrified of certain other things, you know, like and also it's interesting, this is the first book I've read in 40k where you've got kind of the view of somebody leading, like, something as big as a dynasty, or, like, you know, because I've read stuff like Dark Imperium, but Gilliman isn't steering the ship for the entire Imperium. He's steering his crusade, and he's, like, you know, he's trying to steer the ship for the entire Imperium, but there's too many cooks in the kitchen. So, like, he's having to fight people to try and steer it. Whereas in this, Oltex essentially has an entire court look at him and go, right, our home just got blown up, now what? You're the king, you tell us. And you basically just have kind of like this complete crisis of, like, wait, everything I say is law because of how our society works. Shit, now what do I do? And then, you know, as the book goes on, it goes to his head. And in a previous recording, I referred to it as the part where he starts to lose it and become more power hungry. Kind of remind me of Macbeth a bit. The idea of this person who's wanted the crown for so long and has finally got it, and now is starting to lose it with the pressure of, like, ruling. It's But yeah, like I say, it's a good, you know, it's good to read for a lore standpoint, but it is also just a damn good read. I like the characters in it. Apart from my minor flub of forgetting how to name the main character, Oltex, but there's also Jaciras and several other characters. There's a Cryptek in here that I quite like, who has a lot of secrets, and, like, there's a lot of plot twists about him, so I'm not gonna talk about him too much because he's one of the main supporting characters. And there's also a Praetorian, a Preyarch. No, not a Preyarch. The old version of Lichguard from the 3rd edition book. I can't think of the word off the top of my head. But yeah, just, I genuinely, if you're a fan of Necrons, read it. If you're a fan of 40k books or sci-fi in general, I think you'll really get a kick out of this one. I mean, just the Necrons as a race for sci-fi are just really interesting, because you've got the baggage of the fact that you have a protagonist that isn't human, and as such doesn't have certain limitations, which is one thing with sci-fi that really irks me. The majority of even books, like, say the Heresy books where you've got Astartes as characters, even they tend to have, like, human characters as secondary main characters. Like, you never get a book that's entirely from the point of view of a character that's not human. And yeah, okay, I say personality-wise, the Necrons feel more human than the actual humans in 40k. But in terms of biology and like how stuff works and just everything about their society is completely alien. And it was honestly a really good. It was a joy to read. And to be honest, I hope the guy who wrote this gets to write more Necron books in the future, because I actually really like the way he tackled the Necrons, and it's just nice to see a different faction in 40k getting a turn with the lore. And I'm kind of sad to see that Tyranids didn't get a go in 10th edition, because we have the Leviathan book, but I'm pretty sure that's primarily going to be Space Marines again, kind of like Indomitus was. But hey ho guys, if you are 40k fans and you have any more Necron book recommendations, put them down below. I will share another one with you all. Caiaphas Cain, Caves of Ice. Yeah, I know it's primarily Guard, but it does the whole showing off how scary Necrons are to the average person, which is pretty neat, and it covers another side of them. Probably closer to more the 3rd edition skulking metal horrors, because guess what? Cain didn't actually come across a Necron with personality until recently. the most recent book he had actually came across a Lord with personality, and it kind of spooked him. It's like, wait, what? These things think they have personalities? What? Because he's only been up against Necron line infantry and stuff like that, and he's kind of used to the idea that they're just program killing machines. So, yeah, it's just a Cain book. It's just fun, like. But anyway, guys, that aside, I'll leave you all and hope you enjoyed the video. And I will be looking to do more like this in the future, with the more laid back, little bit less heavily edited, because I'm trying to do this in a way where I can still enjoy it and still get stuff turned around fairly quickly. Anyway, guys, as I've just said, hope you enjoyed the video. See you soon. Goodbye.